Good morning, everybody. I'm Aaron Mesh with Willamette Week. This is our Distant Voices interview series. Today I'm talking with two people, Holly Martinez and Rian Peck, both of the law firm here in Portland, Perkins Coie. Rian and Holly were both involved in writing drafting, I guess the term is drafting, a lawsuit that was filed on Monday, July 27, against the Department of Homeland Security and several other federal law enforcement agencies. It's not the first lawsuit being filed against DHS and other federal policing agencies, but it's one of the most interesting. You know, the first question, Rian, that I'd love to chat with you about is the Attorney General for Oregon, Ellen Rosenblum, just had a similar lawsuit that was dismissed by a federal judge on Friday. What's different about this one?
The major difference is that we have plaintiffs who attended the protests and have been injured, as well as organizational plaintiffs who have worked to support these protests through organization and providing supplies to help protect protesters.
So the difference then is a question of what's known as standing, right?
Yes.
What does standing mean exactly?
Standing means that you're sufficiently injured or the right person to bring the lawsuit before the court. You have a stake in the case.
Got it. So a big difference that the judge said he wouldn't issue a temporary restraining order on behalf of the state of Oregon because he said it wasn't clear if the state of Oregon has been harmed. In this case, Holly, who do you have that you're representing who has been harmed?
So all of our plaintiffs have been harmed, but I'll focus on some of our organizational plaintiffs here. The main being Don't Shoot Portland. They are a community action plan nonprofit that has been involved in the Black Lives Matter movement since the movement's origin after the death of Trayvon Martin. And they are a group that functions on what's called mutual aid, which is basically the community coming together to donate supplies and services to each other for mutual benefit. And here, Don't Shoot PDX has supplied things like masks, hand sanitizer, water, funds, food, etc. to protesters. And what's happened since the federal officers has moved in is that these supplies are being damaged either directly through brute force of the officers or through long-range munitions like tear gas and other chemical agents that taint and destroy these materials that are essential, especially during COVID-19, to keep protesters safe and allow for them to continue to exercise their constitutional rights.
Does it appear to the two of you that officers have intentionally targeted food supplies and other items that are necessary for protest?
Yes, and it's also clear to our plaintiffs who have been damaged.
There's an interesting argument that's being made in this lawsuit, if I understand it correctly, and that argument is that the president is essentially trying to create his own national police force that will police individual communities depending on his political whims. Is that an accurate representation of what you're saying in this suit?
Yeah, I think that's probably a maybe more forcefully worded than we would put it. But yes, essentially what we're saying is that Trump has deployed these troops to Portland precisely because of the message that protesters are sending, that Black Lives Matter, that police violence against Black Lives Matter is completely unacceptable and needs to end. And this message has been heard loud and clear. It's continued in Portland for a very long time with these protests. And this city was the test case for him to see if federal troops could quell the message of his political opponents.
So clearly that's troubling, and I don't think it's necessary to explain why that's troubling. Why isn't it legal?
Well, one of the many reasons is that in order for federal officers to be able to come and actively police away from the federal building, which is what they are doing, they are not staying in the federal building, they are not limiting their services, if you want to call them that, to protection at the federal building. They're actually pushing out further away from federal property. They're deploying tear gas and other chemical weapons that fill entire streets and are in excess of what would be necessary to clear crowds from federal buildings. And, it's just going to continue. And the purpose of this lawsuit is to try to mitigate some of that.
If you win, do they have to leave?
Man, if we win. Well, we're at the very beginning here. We're in our complaint. Obviously the end goal would be for them to leave, but the purpose of this lawsuit is to protect the protesters here and our plaintiffs who are exercising their rights and are being fired upon by rubber bullets and tear gas and other supposedly less lethal munitions in exercising their rights. So while the federal officers leaving would be best for our community, the purpose of this lawsuit is to protect those who are on the front lines exercising their rights.
So I guess maybe my question is, what is it? The word redress? What are you seeking? What's the outcome that the lawsuit is seeking?
I think that the best answer to that question is we're still working on it. We're still deliberating. What are the best things that we can ask for from a court? What can we legally ask for from a court? And as you probably know, this has been a fast-moving case, and we're taking things on as they go. But if we can ask for the federal officers to leave, 100%. That's what we're going to do.
I'm not trying to be difficult in asking this question, but it's unusual, I think, for a lawsuit to enter into the federal courts without a specific outcome in mind. Is that something that you did intentionally?
Well, we are asking for the relief that that the officers stop deploying, chemical weapons, especially during COVID-19, and deploying other munitions and specifically destroying the supplies that we mentioned. But we haven't, this is an ongoing issue in downtown Portland. There's protests and violence being perpetuated by the federal officers every single night. So this case is very much emerging as we go. And I think that's what Rian was pointing to, is that as we continue our research and as these events unfold before us, we will have a more clear path toward all of the relief that's available to us, which we certainly want to encompass.
So, on a slightly different note, maybe a more personal question, I feel a certain frustration as a reporter and as an editor in these times that no matter what we reveal, it seems like the federal government just continues to do whatever it wants. And I sense sometimes in the legal community the same frustration that no matter how many times you win or restrain them or pull them back or limit their powers, they don't really care. There are currently restraining orders against both federal and local police about using force against reporters, for example, and we see it happen again and again every night. So, do you feel a sense of frustration or powerlessness, or do you feel greater resolve to keep going?
Well, both, quite honestly, and I think that anyone would be right to be concerned. I think this is not at all demonstrative of democracy, and it's an extreme risk to everyone involved. This is not how a government should function. A government should work for its people, and that's not what's going on right now. And, in addition, I support Black Lives Matter. I proudly do. And this is very concerning that the Black Lives Matter movement and their message in particular is being approached so violently in comparison to some of these other protests that we've seen even recently from anti-masking groups, anti-quarantine groups that stormed the Capitol building, some of them with weaponry, which our protesters here in Portland are not doing. And, night after night are greeted with exceptional violence. And even these munitions, these officers are not qualified to be doing this work. And I think that's evident by the fact that some of these less lethal munitions, like rubber bullets, for example, are meant to be ricochet objects and fired at the ground. And instead, these officers are firing them directly at protesters and causing significant harm. Protesters have been hit in the head, in the chest, and other parts of the body. And quite frankly, if something doesn't happen, there will be death at the hands of these federal officers by just the sheer level of violence that they're unleashing on protesters exercising their rights of speech and assembly. And, even protesters out who have asthma, when this tear gas is released, they can't breathe and they need medical equipment and medical support. And if that same tear gas is contaminating all of the items, we're going to have a major problem on our hands.